So we're in a message series now called Sun Stand Still. And Sun Stand Still is a series or it is a story out of the Bible that a person, his name was Joshua, prayed this phenomenally audacious prayer to stop, for the sun to stop. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details about what happened, but basically God had told Joshua that he was supposed to fight a battle and complete the battle in a one-day period. And so Joshua saw that this was not happening, that the battle was being fought and they were winning, but not at the speed that it would be done, so that it would be done before the day was over. So Joshua, knowing that God called him to do this, knowing this important thing that God had him to do, just prays an audacious prayer in front of his men, and everybody else didn't really care for the sun to just stop so that he could do what God had called him to do. And guess what? The sun stood still. And when the sun stood still, it caused them to have the time that they needed to be able to accomplish that task. Now, here in our country, we call it daylight savings time. We get an extra hour. When does that happen? Now, no, we don't do that. That's November the 6th. So we're going to lose an hour. No, actually, this is the good one, guys. November 6th is the one that we all look forward to, because it's the one where we get an extra hour, and you're like, what do I do with this extra hour? Do I sleep? Sleep, yep. Or do I stay up later? Yep. And do I stay up later and then sleep in, but I really didn't sleep in? And then it takes us 2 or 3 days for our internal clocks to get caught up to that 1 hour difference. But what we want to talk about today is Joshua demonstrated a tremendous amount of... Bo, I'm going to let you sit this down right there if you don't mind. That way I don't have to flip it around down there. Joshua demonstrated a tremendous amount of audacious faith in God. He put his audacious faith into action when he actually went and prayed. After he had this faith that he was supposed to do what God was saying, he actually went and put his words or his faith into action, and he prayed. And then in addition to this, he and his men kept fighting, anticipating God to make the sun stand still, and the sun stopped. So here's the thing I want to tell you, though. Walking in audacious faith will not always make the sun stand still for you. I hate to break that to you. Some of you think if I just can have that faith of Joshua and that audacious faith, maybe if I could get to that point and be a strong enough believer in God, a strong enough faith, an audacious faith, that I could pray that, then the sun would stand still for me. Let me tell you, there's no guarantee that the sun will stand still because you pray for the sun to stand still. In fact, your faith does not control God. That might be a shock to some of you. For some people, they forget the fact that human faith can never control God's divine providence. In other words, sometimes people you love will get sick and they won't recover. Sometimes you will pray for something to happen and it won't happen. You won't achieve everything that you attempt just because you have audacious faith. You'll have to absorb and manage some pain that you didn't create in your life, you didn't invite into your life, and you don't deserve in your life. And it's just going to happen, even when you don't want it to be there. There's going to be days in your life that you can have audacious faith in God, and you're still going to have days filled with frustration and misery. So the question becomes is what happens when we pray what we think are audacious prayers and they still don't seem to be answered? What do we do when we pray a sun stand still prayer and the sun still goes down? What do? Have you been there before? When I was 16 years old, my grandfather was a very important person in my life. He allowed me to do things that I love my father, I love my mom, but my grandfather was my grandfather. You understand what I'm saying? I'm a granddad now, and I'm trying to use that as the example for me to be a granddad. Now, there's some things he was kind of rough. There's some things that I don't agree with what he did. But in terms of being a grandfather, he let me do stuff that my dad wouldn't do. 14 years old, I was driving a truck on the farm. Now, my dad wasn't going to let me do that. He let me hold a gun. Not only did he let me hold a gun, he let me shoot a gun. Now, he also did things like teach me how an electric fence worked. And now that I think about it, and I'm like, that was a hard lesson to learn. And back then they had a tiller that we had a tiller that you used, and the way that we cut it off was you push this little metal thing up against the spark plug. And he told me to try it without the metal thing and touch the spark plug. Let me just advise you. Sometimes grandpas, when they say pull their finger, don't do that. I mean, I don't know if you got a grandfather, but anyway, but my grandfather meant a lot to me. And one day, my grandfather was he was in the textile industry, and he was a manager in the local textile company. He was an alderman. He was on the fire department. He just done about everything that you could do in that little small town. And we had gone to meet him for an activity. We were working at a place together, and we were going to meet him there, and we got there ahead, and then the police came. And we were in another town, and the police came, and they got my dad and said something to my dad. My dad told me and my brother to get in the car, and we took off riding. They said, my daddy or my grandfather had a heart attack. And because he was an alderman, the police were coming to escort us to get us back, to get my dad back to my grandmother, to get him back into town. And I just remember that drive back and through, and we were country people. It's not like we're driving from here to Metter. You understand? It's not like it's maybe a little bit closer than that, you know. But on the road, all the roads were blocked by police officers, blocking it so we could go. And this is the fastest that we've ever drove in my life that I knew that people could drive that weren't on the racetrack. And I prayed the whole way. I prayed for God not to take my grandfather. I mean, he meant a lot to me. My grandfather, that's my grandfather. And I was selfish. I wasn't praying about my dad or my aunt or my grandmother. I was praying for me. He meant something to me. And I didn't know what I was going to do without him. And so I'm praying. We get there to the house, and they take my dad and my grandmother, and they go on off. And then I go out to the field out back where the cows are. And I wandered off. They all got worried about me because they knew how close I was to my grandfather. And I wandered off out there, and I'm just praying. I just remember sitting there praying, God, don't take him. Don't take him. And I prayed. I mean, listen, if it's love, if it's faith in God, and if it's audacity, I'm telling him, I'll do whatever you want me to do. And I prayed. And my grandfather died. And it sucked. And I prayed this prayer of audacious faith, and the sun didn't stand still. Heck, I didn't want the sun to stand still. I just wanted my grandfather to live. It's that simple. He's a good man. And he died. He died. And it hurt. And I cried. And it still hurts. I'm still about to cry. I remember, now see, I'm deviating from my script here because it's all coming back, and I remember, you know the first time I ever done anything in public of speaking or anything like that? 16 years of age, we're sitting around the room, and all the adults are making the plans for the wedding, or for the funeral. I don't want to be in there, but when you're 16, you're considered adult. I'd already moved from the little card table at Christmas, and it was at the big table eating. You understand what I'm saying? And my uncle, who's this godly Christian, just a really different denomination than we were. Like, oh my gosh, he's not the same denomination as us. But it was still, he was a godly man. And they were talking about doing the graveside. They said, need somebody to read the scriptures. And he said, the boy over there will read. Pointed at me. Now I'm thinking there got to be another boy in the room because it ain't me. And now I think about it now. That might have been the first step of me being a pastor. I had to stand by my grandfather's grave. and read a 23rd Psalm. What happens when you pray an audacious prayer and it doesn't get answered like you want? What do? Run. A lot of people run. A lot of people get mad. A lot of people go to a bottle. A lot of people drink. A lot of people do all kinds of things, all to try to affect this feeling that you have. Now, when Joshua had this happen to him, you would think that Joshua prays this audacious prayer over here for the sun to stand still, and God hears him and the sun stands still. This man must have been anything he prayed all his life must have happened. Well, it didn't. It didn't. See, 40-some years earlier, we find Joshua as a younger version of himself. And this younger version of himself, now he's an adult. He's not 16, but he's probably in his 20s. And he's a leader in his group. In fact, this group of Israelites had escaped from Egypt, and they had seen the plagues, and they'd seen all the things happen. And Pharaoh's army they had seen killed in the Red Sea when the water parted and they went through and the water closed in over Pharaoh. And they came through that and they went through the wilderness, and they would see God guide their whole nation by a pillar of fire at night and by a cloud during the day. They'd experienced God speaking to Moses and giving them the 10 Commandments and giving them these instructions. They had experienced all this and came right up to the Promised Land. That for thousands of years, and especially the last 400 years that they've been in captivity, that they've been praying for, audaciously praying for God to help them. And it was right across the river. Right across the Jordan River. And some spots of the Jordan River, man, is no further than from here across Fair Road. Just that close. Right there. And so they pull together 12 of their leaders, one from each of the tribes. And they have those leaders to go over. Well-respected leaders. They took those 12 leaders and said, you go behind enemy lines over there and you scout out the land. And Moses told them, said, listen, you go over there. Don't you spend some time over there. You go check out how strong they are, how fortified they are, what their cities are like, what their food is like. You tell us, is this really the place that God has brought us to? Is this home? Is this our future home? And so they come and they start telling the people all this. They stayed over there 40 days. They went around. They got to one area. They saw some grapevines. It was that time of the season, so they cut the grapes off in a big bunch, and they had to carry it between two guys on a pole. They were so huge. Brought them back. When they got back, they went before the people, and they began to tell them this story of all that it was and everything that it is. And the 12 of them were saying, it's great. It's what we thought it would be. But then 10 of the 12 began to talk a little different story. Listen to what they said. Now Caleb, well, wait a minute. Let me tell you what 10 said. The 10 said, this land eats us alive. This land devours those. Caleb's like, no. Let's go on over there and let's take this land. It's what God says. So this is where I'm going to pick up at verse 30. Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we certainly can do it. But the men who had gone up with him said, we can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land that they had explored. They said, the land that we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there were of great size. And it lists these people that are great sized people. It says, we seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes. And we look the same to them. Now, they're telling we can't go in there. Now, this begins to be an issue. And the people began to talk and mutter among themselves. And as they talked and muttered among themselves, they had second thoughts about going in there. Their fear started to take over them. Now, Joshua and Caleb, 2 of the 10 spies, or 2 of the 10 leaders of their tribes, came and said in Numbers 14, Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of whatever that guy's name is, Jephunneh, who were among those who explored the land, they tore their clothes in mourning and said to the entire Israelite assembly, the land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. We've seen it. It's the real deal. If the Lord is pleased with us, He will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord. You start to see His audacity. You start to hear His faith in God. He says, and do not be afraid of the people of this land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. He says all of these things. This audacious faith is coming out. It's coming out in His words. He's really put it to action. You understand? This is Him. This is 40 years earlier. And guess what happened? All the people rallied around Him, right? Yeah. Now look, verse 10. But the whole assembly talked about stoning them. This guy has this audacious faith and believes this audacious thing. And in his initial prayer, he's saying the same thing. He's believing in God. And they talk about stoning him. In fact, they don't get to the promised land. They don't get to go in there. They wander the desert until everyone but Joshua and Caleb and Moses and Aaron are dead, because God said, you know what? Matter of fact, I think I got that somewhere. Chris skipped to Numbers. Let me read that to you. It's Numbers 8. It says, then the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting to all the Israelites. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me in spite of all the signs that I have performed among them? God didn't answer their prayer. In fact, He told Moses, He says, I'm going to grow up a nation in front of, just through you. I'm done with these people. Done with them. Except for Joshua and Caleb and your brother Aaron, who believed me, who stood in the gap, who had that audacious faith, but you're not going in there today. He said, in fact, you're going to wander around 1 year for every day that y'all explored that land. How many days they explored the land? How many years did they wander around in the desert? That's how that ties together. And they all died out except for those 4. 12 years and older, everyone died. And a new generation came. And on that day, Joshua's son's standstill prayer was not answered. 40 years he watched his loved ones and everyone else die. His parents, his grandparents, all people 12 years and old, he watched them die for 40 years because his son's standstill prayer didn't work. And it hurt. Funeral after funeral and loss after loss, and wandering around for 40 years and not having a home, and all the disgruntledness that happens in that community. See, on that day, the sun didn't stand still for Joshua. And you see, the enemy wasn't those big guys on the other side of the water. The enemy was Satan. Because Satan stole from the Israelites their faith in God that day. You see, here's what the lie is. The lie is that their fear was bigger than their God. Their fear was bigger than God. Their fear was this size. You see this size fear? Imagine me having a picture frame right here. They had it framed in right here. There's the size of their fear. And right here, outside that picture frame, is the little bitty God that they serve. And their fear was greater than their God. And because of that, they listen to the words. They listen to the words that says, they are stronger than we are. The land we explore devours those living in it. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same to them. In fact, they talked about stoning those who believe different. See, basically in crisis, where some of the people are saying, don't go in because the people are too large for us and too powerful, Joshua and Caleb were trying to tell them, the truth is that our God is bigger than our fears. It doesn't mean that Joshua and Caleb and them weren't afraid. Their God was bigger than their fears. See, here's what I found about fear. And see if you find this in your own life. Fear is contagious. If you get it, it rubs off on other people. Don't believe me? Walk your tail over there to the Georgia Southern Haunted Forest in a couple of weeks. Okay? Get in that line and just walk through there. And all you got to do is scream really loud one time, and 4 other people are screaming. They have no idea what they're screaming about. All you have to do is go in that forest, and as soon as some guy comes out with a chainsaw and comes after you, you take off running. 4 people don't know what they're running, but they're going to follow you. They're going to leave. Fear is contagious. Always has been. I also know this about fear. If you don't control fear in your life, fear will limit your view of God. If you don't control the fear in your life, fear will limit your view of God. See, here's what my thought is. Fear is this size right here. It's in their picture frame. They got it framed in. You understand? They got a picture of fear, and God's over here. He's not even in the picture. Because our fear is so big. They're bigger than we are. We're stronger than they are. I don't know what crap is going on in your life. I don't know the struggles that you're going through. You're probably sitting there going, you don't understand how big this thing is in me. I struggle with this issue. I struggle with that issue. You don't understand how big this is. It's not just this type of Bible stuff. This is stuff that's real life things to me. I can't pay my bills. I can't do this. I'm struggling with this addiction. You can't handle this. This relationship can't be fixed. And your fear is sitting there controlling you because God is only that big. See, what Joshua and Caleb believed was, this is your fear, but this is God. See, God's not this little thing over here. God is this big. See, your fear doesn't change. The size of your fear doesn't change. The size of your God is what changes. That's what helps you get through fear. That's what helps you overcome. That's what helps you live in audacious faith. It's not whether you have fear or not. It's not whether there's an absence of fear. You're always going to have fear. There's always going to be some type of fear in our life. But confidence comes not in who you are, but who God is and how big God is. See, I believe that if you never faced an enemy of God, you would never get an opportunity to experience God's victory. See, audacious faith doesn't guarantee that you're going to have a crisis-free life. If you're hoping for that, and you're looking for me to preach that to you, you need to go to another church or go somewhere else, because I'm not going to tell you that lie, because that lie would come from the pits of hell. If I told you because you have audacious faith or because you love Jesus that your life won't have crisis in them. But I will tell you this, because you love Jesus and because you have faith, when that crisis happens, you can be the person to persevere through the fear and make a difference so God's glory shows through you. And the world will see how big God is through your actions. And they may believe. The first thing is, you've got to believe this about your God. Audacious faith does not enable you to see, audacious faith does enable you to seize the opportunity to see God's glory in the midst of every crisis in your life. See, 30, 40 some years later, I don't even know how old difference it is, I'm seeing the glory of God in my life standing on this stage when I remember what I did for my grandfather's funeral. It can happen just like that. See, where there is no opposition, there is no opportunity. Because you'd never see how strong God was if there was never an opponent for him to overcome in your life. We would never know how big God was and could work through little David versus big Goliath if there wasn't a big Goliath. We would never know how God works through Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they're thrown into the fire if there wasn't a Nebuchadnezzar to build the fire to have all this going on. There are bad, terrible things that happen. There are struggles and issues going on, some by your own choice and some that's not by your own choice. But they are opportunities for God to show through. And sometimes the sun has to go down in your life, even when you pray for it not to go down. Sometimes your prayers aren't answered in that moment for you to be able to see this God and really determine how big is the God that you follow. See, for me, the way that we change this is we've got to reframe our situation. You ever thought about what makes world-changing Christians unique or audacious or powerful? It's not because they're perfect. It's not because they're great people, because many times they're not great people. Some of them have some issues about them. But do you know what makes them world-changing Christians or audacious or as powerful as what they are? They get this understanding. They understand and hold on to some essential truths. And they hold on to those truths for dear life as they follow Jesus Christ in faith one step at a time. I believe it's their understanding of these two things. Number one, how they feel doesn't give them their identity. How they feel doesn't give them identity. You feel crappy today, that doesn't give you the identity of being crappy. You feel like a jerk today, you feel lazy today, that doesn't make you lazy or a jerk. What makes you lazy or a jerk is the actions that you do. And I believe the second thing is that this God that they follow is something worth taking risk for. Who's the God that you're serving? And when's the last time you took a risk for Him? When's the last time you went to the edge and took one more step, not because of who you are, but by who God is in this world? People ask me all the time, say, Preacher Dorsey, tell me, I'm just trying to find my purpose in life. What's my purpose? Help me find my way in life. Let me tell you something. I can't tell you what your purpose is in life. But what I can tell you is that whatever that purpose is, you're going to have to work for it. Your purpose is not going to be found in this life. Your purpose is going to be forged through the times that you battle and struggle through things in life. What people experience as revelation is often a result of resolve, perseverance. It looks instantaneous to many of us, but it took them years to get to that point. Joshua praying that sun stand still prayer was 40 years in the making of not being answered. And then that day come, his fears didn't change. His expectations didn't change, but his understanding of God did change. And God can make the sun stand still. And I got the courage and the guts to pray it if nobody else will. See, audacious faith is forged in the fires from our struggles of life. Rarely is it gained in an instant. It takes time, and it's forged through struggles, and it's hammered out on an anvil of God's love and grace and mercy as He makes you into the thing or the person He's called you to be. And as He hammers that out and as He heats you up, all those impurities and all those things and all those doubts and all those fears, they're still going to be there, but you I'll push through them because God makes me stronger. Because it's not about me, it's not about my fear. It's about this God that's bigger than the fear. See, the world will tell you, I feel down, and I'm sad, and I'm struggling. You know, you go up to ask people, we do it all the time, how you feeling? As soon as somebody asks you that question, how you feeling, you go, well, I'm feeling sort of down, I've been having a rough time, and this, that, and the other. And you know what the first thing they're going to tell you is? An action. Well, here's, I've had, some of them will jump in there with you. Remember, fear is contagious. Yeah, man, I'm having a toothache and my tooth is hurting me. Yeah, I can remember, and my jaw's been hurting me too, and my knee's been hurting me. And then before you get it, it's a big pity party. You've been there. You understand that. I flunked my test, and I did this. I didn't study. Well, I flunked mine. I did this, and then I cheated on the test. You know what? Your feelings do not dictate who you are. Because between feelings and your identity is the actions that you take. And your actions determine your identity. And the interesting thing to me is that's the way the world tells you that. How you feel will be actions you'll take. And the actions you take will be who you become. Right? Isn't that the way we tell it? Just think it and believe it and you'll become it. Right? Just feel it. That's bullcrap. Sorry about that. That's bullcrap. Let me tell you what the truth is. The truth is you need to know who you are or who you're becoming. Who is the identity that you want to be? Who is it that God is calling you to be in that moment? That's your identity. And then the question you need to say, well, that's not who I am this moment. That's who I want to be. That's what I think I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be a godly person in this situation. This is what I'm called to do. This is who I'm supposed to be. Then I would say, then take an action to do that. Now, you go over here to your feelings with it. I don't feel like I'm a godly person. It ain't about whether you feel like a godly person. It's about being a godly person and taking the actions to be a godly person. And later on, your feelings will catch up with you. And then you'll start feeling like a godly person. You get put in overwhelming circumstances, then how do you get out of overwhelming circumstances? What would God dare me to do? Who's the identity I want to be in this crisis? Who do I want to be in this crisis? Then what actions do I take? Man, you CCF guys, you rocked my world last week. You lived this out. We sit here and I preach a sermon to everybody. Ooh, hey, everybody's happy. These guys went and did it. I'm getting texts, my phone's blowing up. Hey, we heard right after church you told us to do something. We're over at Rebecca's Cafe and we're feeding people. We're making sandwiches. We went over here after church. Next day, 6 or 7 of the guys are going around and they're helping people in their yards. When most of the college students were on their games. Who do you want to be in the crisis that you're in? And take the actions. And quit going off your feelings. I don't feel godly. I don't feel holy. I don't feel saved. That's one of the ones that got me. Man, God beat me up so much, or Satan beat me up so much, I don't feel saved. I can't tell you how many times I prayed the sinner's prayer, whatever that is. If they said it in a different language, I tried to say it in a different language at one time in my life. I prayed it I don't know how many times. I heard a professor one time say, I've been born again so many times, I got stretch marks on my soul. That's the way I felt. See, what we want to do is we want to find out who do you want to be? Who do you want to be in this situation? I'm in a tough relationship with my boyfriend, with my girlfriend, with my spouse. I've got a tough relationship with my children. I've got a tough relationship with my parents. Who do I want to be in this situation? Then what's one thing I can do to become that? Then do it. Well, I don't feel like I can do it. I don't feel. Your God is bigger than your feelings or your fears. Or my God is. Not sure about yours. Because your actions will match what you believe. Now, here's the other thing I'll say as I get ready to close out. You need to find a model. You need to find a model. If you see somebody who's like that person that you want to be, do you understand? I thought about it the other day when I was prepping for this sermon. I listed out 3 men in my life that are important. Important men in my life that I'm not even around now that I try to model myself after. That I sit there and say, I'll just give you an example, and I'll say his name. I'm not afraid to say his name. If I want to know how to be a godly husband and how to be a godly father, Billy McKinnon. Billy McKinnon's a friend of mine. I've watched him do stuff that I'm like, how do you do that when you got all this business stuff going on and you're still there for your wife? How do you be that man? How do you be this for your children? How do you be this for your church? How do you be this in that situation? And so I just watch Billy. I try to be like Billy. I try to do a step like what he's doing. I see somebody like my friend Jay Hansen, who's really my coach, but he's my friend. And that guy, man, I'm like, how do you persevere through when you struggle having personal time with God? How do you persevere to just read the scriptures? What happens when it gets so busy and so much stuff going on that how do you even breathe? And he systematically, and I watch, and he does things like, I set my clock 15 minutes earlier. And I do this. And so I set my clock 15 minutes earlier. I don't feel good when I set it up. It doesn't feel right to set it early. But you know what? My feelings ain't going to tell me what to do anymore. My identity is in Christ. And my actions are going to show that. Remember I went on a sabbatical about 3 or 4 months ago? Remember that? You know why I went on that sabbatical? Because Jay Hansen told me to. He asked me to. You know, I didn't want to go. Y'all don't know, maybe you know, there was 1 week, it was a silent sabbatical. I don't know if you know what a silent sabbatical is, but for a man like me, that word silent sucks. Yeah. And it did the whole week. But I didn't talk. Because if that's the action he took, and that helps him to be that, then I'll do that. James says this, and you guys can come on up, man. James says this, what good is it, my brothers and sisters, if anyone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of them says to you, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if not accompanied by action, is dead. In the same way, faith not accompanied by action is dead. Let me tell you something. When God doesn't answer your prayers, or you don't feel like He's answering your prayers, are you still going to have faith? Are you still going to believe that God is God and you're not? God is in control and you're not. My job is to hear from God and do what God says. That's my identity. Or are you going to go off your feelings? I don't feel like I can get out of this position I'm in. I don't feel like I can get over this addiction or this situation I'm in. I don't feel like I can be the man that I need to be in this relationship, or the woman I need to be in this relationship, or the parent that I need to be, or the daughter or son in this relationship. I don't feel like I can be this person in this work or in this school. I don't feel like I'm the person that can make a difference in this world. I'm telling you, quit living off your feelings and start being that person. You are a person who can change this world. You are the people that God has called to change this world. And it's not because of you, it's because of Him. And you're going to have fear. And you're going to struggle. Audacious faith doesn't mean your prayers are going to be answered all the time. But it does mean this, that God, in every crisis that you're in, has an opportunity to make a difference when you take your frame away and let the world see how big He is through you. Now on your connection cards now, pull those out. I want you to take a few moments at this point in our service. On the back of that card, you got your prayer concerns. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff on the front. Some of it's in small print. I can't read, but it's probably good stuff if I can read it. But on the back side, and I don't know which is back, the one that's not orange, it's got some boxes down there that says, I will read Numbers 13 and 14 and reflect on who God is this week. If that's something that you might consider doing, and I'm encouraging you to do that, check that block. Might be contacted by the pastor or staff member, check that block too. One says, I will try to memorize James 2:14 through 17 and put it in action. Oh my gosh, I just struggled over this. Tasha and I went round and around. Lindsay, we had conversations all about, can anybody memorize a verse that long? I said, I don't know, we're going to give it a try. But the second part of that, if you get it memorized or not, if you try reading it, putting it into action, oh my gosh, you can do that. If you go attempt to try to do that, check that one. The next one is, I will not give up on God no matter what. And for some of you, your whats are pretty big right now. And for many of us, we've given up on Him. We've let the fear of what others are telling us, you can't pass that school, you can't finish that, you're too far, drop out of school and come on home and go to work. If you feel like God's called you here, you stick it out. You stay in there. You want to be I'm not talking to you guys, but you go tell somebody else this. You understand? I'm just sort of directing over here, but y'all just tell. I'm just going to turn my head from that over there, and I'm just going to say this. You want to be a successful student? That's what your identity is? Then start taking the actions to be one. And quit going off your feelings because you flunked your first test, you flunked your second test, and move on. Take the actions that's needed to be that person. You got troubles in your relationships. You got troubles in your finances. You figure out and you say to yourself, I want to be out of debt. I want to not owe this much. And then you start taking actions to do that. For some of you, it might be, I want to start giving to the church. Maybe I've got so much stuff on me I can't give. Take an action to do that. Quit letting your feelings and your fears run your life. And the last one is pretty cool. I will invite someone to come with me to church next week. Now here's one. Once you invite them, get them here. You understand what I'm saying? I invited 10 people, and I'm like, okay, did they come? Nope, but I keep inviting them. I'm like, yeah, get them here. Well, I don't know how to do that. I don't feel like I can invite anybody. Don't base it off your feelings. Take the action. I'm going to calm down now a little bit and just let us go into this next song. And you reflect on these things. And I'm going to ask that you stay seated as they start to sing and reflect and process through the first part of this song. And at some point in time, Joel or Devin or myself will stand up, and then we'll ask you to join in with us on the singing. But the words of the song, critical to understanding this. It says in here a phrase, I gotta get rid of myself. And the part that's talking about getting rid of, it's not the fear, but being driven by my feelings. So I'm going to let them go ahead and take us on from here.